I came to it's the same thing as being in relationships for me. The same problem. I was looking for an answer and thought that was it. And also thought that it could give me something it couldn't give me. So I think a lot of people go into the music industry who are broken people who need to express. And there's somewhere in the back of the head that they think they're going to get validation. The music industry does not give you validation.
No, not at all.
It does not. There's so much rejection.
Okay, so we're live.
Are they on?
I see.
Oh, okay. Well, the lights.
I see you.
Okay, hello.
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 So here we are.
Yes.
This is quite amazing because we've known each other and been friends for so long.
Yeah.
Miss Laura Marie.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you.
You as well. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while.
This is fun to catch up over. And I think the connectedness, how it happened was just randomly me kind of seeing you going through a healing journey.
Yeah.
And what you've been doing for yourself and your music. And I think it's pretty cool, especially seeing the growth from knowing you 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Been that long, right?
Yeah.
Since around like 2000.
There's been a lot of growth. Yeah.
Wow.
There's been a lot of growth.
And
20 years. Yeah.
We've been talking a little bit here beforehand, and it's just a lot of coincidences and pretty cool things that happen that we don't always get to share with people. So it's kind of really nice to share this with you. Maybe tell me a little bit, or tell everyone a little bit about, I guess we'll talk about the power of healing.
Yeah.
The creative process. Like if I would have asked you what healing meant 10 years ago, would it have even resonated anything?
Not on the level it does now, that's for sure.
Right.
I mean, it would have felt more like this whole idea of being physically, well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way. And
Yeah.
so in the past almost 2 years in my own journey, it's been quite unique. And then realizing that there's a mental or emotional healing as well as a spiritual healing.
For sure.
So how did that start for you in this process of healing? Like I know you've been through a lot, kind of like myself, in different times in life, and you had some childhood trauma.
Yeah, for sure.
And you've had other trauma. You've tried to fight it on your own, and then it leads you to a point where eventually, I almost feel like it's a divine intervention.
I think years ago I wrote a song that I referenced this idea of one lesson learned on repeat. And I felt like that my life was that. It was like I kept learning this lesson over and over again, and I couldn't figure out, like I kept going through the conflict thinking that I had somehow resolved this lesson. And for me, it was a dependency and a need, this idea that I needed saving by somebody outside myself. And I needed loving and accepting and to be validated by something outside myself. And so the lesson I kept running into with this idea of that I couldn't do it, that I was helpless. And the healing was learning that I'm the one that heals me. I'm the one that has to do the work for that. And I'm the one that needs to validate myself, and that I'm the only person who can do that work. Nobody can do it for me. And that was the healing. That for me, that was the healing. The healing was this idea, like I have been searching for this answer through looking at all these other people for this answer, and the answer's me. Like you need to reframe, your mind around that.
It's tough. It's tough accepting that.
Yeah.
Because it's weird. It's strange.
I mourned it because I think, so as I had childhood trauma. I was molested as a child, sexually assaulted. And then later on I was drugged and date raped when I was 18, 19.
Wow.
And so I grew up with my boundaries violated. And I don't think I ever knew what it felt like to feel safe in my own body. And I buried it for so many years. Like I didn't tell my parents what happened. I was trying to make sense of it in my head. And of course, you're 8 years old. You can't make sense of it in your head. And the things you tell yourself aren't adequate and they don't frame it correctly. And it wasn't until maybe a year or two ago that my therapist looked at me and said, as I told her, as I finally got to this place in my life so many years later, decades later, where I could actually sit across from somebody and tell them, this is what happened to me and this is what I did in the between then and now. And she just looked at me and said, well, that's typical. And I said, what do you mean typical? She goes, people who've been sexually assaulted, that I hear that all the time. And I didn't even know that.
Wow.
It wasn't some inner failing of me. You know what I mean? Like I was acting out in ways in my life with other people, with relationships, with, just going overboard or getting in these really codependent, unhealthy relationships.
Yes.
And that was kind of a normal thing because I didn't have a sense of inner validation.
I read something earlier. So I randomly had a couple, we were talking about Teal Swan earlier, right? Yeah. And I said, you know this person? Yeah. Anyway, there was something on sexual abuse that came up just randomly in my deal. I was like, I got to write this down.
Yeah.
Because I had already known previously that you had an instance or circumstance that had, I hate to say haunted you, but it does haunt us.
Oh, absolutely.
And she says, I've never shaken hands with somebody who had sexual abuse that has not blamed themselves and used blame and self-hate as a mechanism for feeling more empowered about the experience they were disempowered in. And nobody can actually live feeling like a victim. So a person cannot live in that state of complete powerlessness. Yeah. So I think, would you say that? Like,
yeah.
Blame and self-hate is probably the most normal reaction in this as a therapist.
Yeah. I mean, how else do you make sense of it? You know?
I agree.
So there's just, but it reminds me of something you said earlier too, that idea of feeling a sense of power. And when you said, what would healing look like to you, 20 years ago, I would have told you, I went through that. I mean, I told people, I was molested, I was raped, whatever. But I mean, healing? I don't need healing. I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with it.
I mean, it made me strong. It made me who I am today. So, no big deal.
Do you think I talked to a couple other guys and we always say it's kind of about the way we were raised because our grandfathers and fathers were tough.
Right.
And they went through a lot to get us to where we are. Yeah. And so it was always that, I always say, suck it up, buttercup. Like, you just.
Everybody goes through stuff. I'm fine. I'm good.
And they don't want to share. And now we're in this time of totally sharing.
Right. Because I don't think we really realized how much that messaging and the lessons that we learned, that we thought we learned from those situations, how much they're guiding everything that we do and we don't question it. And it's guiding our shitty relationships. It's guiding the way we react. Because I have dealt with a horrible temper and a horrible, when they use the word trigger, I mean, I could go off on somebody at the, pin drop. I mean, and I would have reactions to loud sounds. I would have reactions to strong smells. It was like I felt attacked if somebody walked by me that I didn't know and I was in a mental state where I was kind of in my own head and they said hello and it was a stranger. I'd be like, I knew I wasn't at peace. I could tell you that. I knew I was not at peace and I didn't know why I wasn't at peace.
Do you think that since the healing process, you now recognize the triggers and it's helped you grow?
Yeah, for sure. But I feel like it's never ending. It's it's just layers and layers and layers. It's layers of unlearning things, but then also, just now is when I'm really able to do work, real actual work on stuff that has come up that I buried for years. I get to these, I'll work on something and I'll feel like, okay, I've grown so much from that. And then I'll feel like this sort of blank space, there's something else there, but I don't know what it is. And then sure enough, because I'm so focused on healing, I'll be going throughout my week and something will trigger me. And then I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the thing. That's the thing that got me.
Do you set aside time like you were going to go exercise to heal?
Oh yeah, I do. I set aside time to do the work.
But I guess, I guess you're right. It's not like, I think part of the knowledge or the wisdom after healing is like, okay, if I'm going to be present and give in to the moment, then I can't plan everything out. You know, you can plan events out and things, you know, kids, you know, responsibilities. I need to go do this tomorrow at 2:00, whatever, certain meetings. But I feel like we're not in control of the outside forces that you know, enable us to realize, oh, okay, this is happening now. I need to spend some time. Like I haven't spent time healing in a while. I need to sit down and spend some time doing that. But you can't just be like every Tuesday, okay, I'm going to healing session.
Right. And you're not just going to sit there like, okay, I'm healing now. I
mean,
for me, it's a process of like, I look to see where I'm not at peace, or if I notice that I'm not happy or not content with something.
Yeah.
I start doing the introspection, like, okay, why am I not happy? And what is it? Where do I feel blocked? And where's that coming from? And sometimes I don't have an answer. So I have to sit there and just be like, okay, well, this is what I think when that situation comes up. So much of it comes from my childhood experiences, growing up feeling like prey most of my life and feeling defensive most of my life. And so, and then also all the ways I reacted and in my marriage, you know, because there's a lot of triggers there. We've been married a long time. And so there's a lot of damage that we've done and a lot of things that we've tried to move past. And so
it's pretty cool.
Know, yeah. So there's a lot of a questioning, like, where does that come? Like just getting curious. And it's the greatest process of the healing process I've been thus far is that there's less and less judgment. It's more and more curiosity.
Yeah. I agree. And so you've been married for a long time.
Yeah.
How many years?
I want to say, well, so we were married in 92. So like do the math. Let's say 30 something. Yeah.
It's a long time.
It's a long time.
Good.
Yeah.
It's great to have a partner like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was he as supportive for you in your healing journey when you started talking about this stuff? Or is he always kind of known, like, or I guess not known, but
so he has not experienced the level of trauma. He's had his own. Everybody has their own traumas, right? But he's not experienced the level of trauma that I had. So we married really young. Like we were, you know, I was 21, and I hadn't figured myself out. He hadn't figured himself out. So we each had our ways of coping with things, and his was just kind of like. He didn't have any frame of reference for what I was going through. So he's just like, oh, she's cool. She's good. You know? And I was like, I'm not cool. I'm not good. I don't know how to handle this. And he didn't understand what he could do for me. Like what could he have done for me? He had no reference for how to help. And I write about it in my book about how we went through some of the traumas we went through in our marriage. But that I had this idea in the back of my head that somehow when I married him, that was going to fix everything. And the thing that I had to understand was that is so much pressure to put on another human being that they're going to fix you. And I was incredibly angry and resentful that he didn't fix me. But how would he know how to fix me? You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so we had to work through that.
Yeah.
But he's always been supportive. It's just like when you don't know what somebody needs, you don't even know how to approach it. So he's like, well, whatever you need, I'll you know, you need to go to a therapist, you need to do this, whatever. But it was a process for me to figure out that what I was doing was I was like angry at him for not going back into my life and giving me all the protection and all the validation and all the love that I thought I needed to heal the trauma I went through. Because I didn't get that then because I never told anybody what happened. And so I didn't, you know what I mean? There's like, you can't go back and fix that. And when I say I mourned the idea of that I had to do the work, was that I mourned the idea that like, I'll never have that experience. I'll never know what it's like to have had, you know, received what I needed to heal so that my life would have gone you know, the way I would want, well, I want my own children's lives to go. It's like, you know, nobody can fix that. My parents can't fix it. They probably couldn't have fixed it then either because nobody really had the tools, right? And they went through their own stuff too. So it's like, I do, when you realize you can't go back and redo that and know what's life is like to live, you know, to just have a normal sex life, because that was a big having sexual abuse. You don't have the way your mind works. It's a really difficult thing, especially being a woman and then being in the music business. This idea of that your worth is tied to your sexuality is super damaging. It was super damaging for me. So that made being a musician complicated. It made being a woman in the world very complicated, as it would for any sexual abuse.
It's still an issue in society, as much as we think it's not, because we talk about it's what's inside. Women are still viewed, most importantly, by how they look. Yeah. And it's sad. It's vain. It's vanity. I always call it vanity. And so for a lot of people, if they can live inside that, right, they're still not getting, they're still going to feel invaluable later, because their time will run out even if they look good, and they'll feel worthless. Yeah.
That's what you're betting on, that doesn't last.
Right. Yeah. I guess it brings up points of, I'd like to say women empowerment, because if there's a divine masculine, there's a divine feminine. And the women's rights movement from the 80s and 90s, which almost put a little bit of hatred towards men because of what men put women through or hid from women, including like affairs, lies, and the things you could get away with back then that you can't necessarily do now. It's a lot harder, even though it still happens. There's a lot of infidelity and things. But it led to a new woman. It led to a stronger woman, which also, I think, from a man's aspect, who's into healing or has in the process of healing or healed and going through it still, we want to speak for other men, because men don't speak to each other like this. They can't get in touch with that divine feminine, and it's important too. And I think as a woman stands there and goes, I'm independent. Yeah. You know, I'm strong woman. I do this on my own, and or if not become the aggressor in relationships, it disempowers the man. Yeah. So there has to be a mutual understanding of like how that relationship can work. So I think it's part of the education for younger folks and even our age relative, because if you've been through enough relationships or been through enough shit or been cheated on or been lied to, you may be jaded or tainted on some level. So the empowerment, I think, is important for women, is because it's taken us to this point where there's a responsibility for a man not only to embark on whatever healing journey he can do. He has a responsibility in how he treats a woman, but the same goes for the woman in how she treats the man.
I see it more as like there's two people, and there's personal growth for both of them, and we are locked into, because I mean, just in the span of my lifetime, gender roles have shifted. The definition, what we get out of marriage has shifted. Like, so it was like 1970s when women could actually have their own credit cards or their own bank accounts. So there was it was kind of a built-in dependency between men and women. So that automatically makes a power differential there, where the man has the more power and the more autonomy, and the woman has less autonomy, which is a very difficult thing to do when you're a woman who has, as all women do, a brain, and you are just as capable, but you're locked into this role of learned helplessness, because you can't go beyond that. So then it starts changing, and women start taking on roles where they can actually use this, be more than just that one thing, at the service of men. But we both sexes have internalized these ideas of gender roles. So it is difficult. Like, I would say for most of my life, I didn't understand the expectation that I wear pink, that I wear a dress, that I care about my nails, that I didn't understand these things. I got spanked in preschool because I wouldn't play in the toy kitchen. I wanted to go play with the building blocks, but I got spanked because
you go be a girl.
Go be a girl. And so that's it was very insulting, because it's just like, well, but that's not, I don't even like that, but also I can do more than just that. Yeah. So it was very, it becomes very difficult when you want people to see you as an individual, and they keep locking you into, no, you're a sexual being who is the object of my desire, and therefore this idea of what you should be in a relationship. And then there's also the things that we've internalized in, like, well, I'm supposed to be these things.
Where's it going now? We still see separation in the workplace, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's still unequal pay and unequal consideration for positions, and
I see it and seen it, and I think there's a lot of leaders, women leaders, who are speaking out more about this and empowering younger women to do that. And I think my support would be maybe in helping in education for women, or maybe even especially Hispanic women, just because of being around here and then being involved with Hispanic women and our families. And then the other thing would be in the workplace, because, or not necessarily work, but owning your own business.
Yeah.
Like understanding what business is, what entities are, how things operate.
Yeah.
And those things we don't get taught these things in school in this day and age. Like we should be teaching kids how to be entrepreneurs, or how to own and operate and hold responsibility and accountability in different ways. And yet we're still trying to teach Christopher Columbus. No, it's strange.
I know, it is strange.
It's very strange in 2023 with all the things that are going on. And then we're in this cancel culture that just really diminishes a lot of things.
It's hard because I think we have to give each other grace, because we're both locked into the role. So my part is to look at men who are, maybe they don't have any frame of reference of what it's like to be more sensitive or more less sexist. On the one hand, I have to set a boundary about how I'm treated, but on the other hand, I don't have to cancel 100% somebody who's never learned what it looks like to treat a woman as something,
accepting somebody for who they are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You got to kind of meet people where they are.
Yeah, and not judge them.
Because they didn't. The only reason they're that way is that's all they've ever known.
Exactly.
So it becomes one of those.
You see it in racism too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
you see it definitely.
That's all they know. So it takes patience, and sometimes I don't have patience for certain things. No. But I have found, like, since I wrote my book and since it's been out, I've been contacted more by men than women about just that journey of drawing boundaries, which was interesting to me because I've had to draw boundaries with men, and that's been a big lesson for me in my life. And so it was odd to have men reaching out to me, but I'm starting to understand that a lot of the men don't have somebody they can talk to about these things. They don't have other men they can talk to.
No, and I'm trying to open that avenue more.
Yeah.
I see some strong men out there doing that, who've been through things and been through a lot of trials and tribulations,
and who've done the work.
And it's a continuous effort. I'm still on that path, still understanding more about myself. And even I talk about my harshness, or from what I know from growing up, right? Or what I've known as an athlete, or being in and around the military, or being raised in a military household. It's that tough love type thing that we all know. But yet at the same time, I know I'm trying to, although I've always been empathetic or compassionate, understanding more, but holding your foundation when people are, I don't want to say they're stepping on it, but when they're coming at it wrong, my natural response is harsh.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand that more. I've always kind of lived my life with my heart on my sleeve. I've always felt I've been protected, but it's also brought me down many different paths and valleys and things and darkness but I've always felt like if I wear my heart on my sleeve and stay truly honest and real, as some of us say but not do, because we're always worried about what other people think, then I don't really live with any boundaries. I contemplate it more now, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, all right, actually, it's a bit hypocritical because I am setting boundaries. I'm saying, hey, I'm not willing to accept this from you. I'm not willing to accept this behavior from you. Matter of fact, I may be harsh at the tongue about it, but then I notice a lot of times people come back later, whether they apologize or they'll say, man, you were right. And I'll say, I wasn't judging you. I wasn't, I was just trying to help. I was like, I guess, I guess I do have some boundaries because I'm not willing to accept certain things.
Yeah. I always felt like, to me, like in my mind, I remember just saying, well, I don't ever want to be like this sense that I'm cut off from anybody. Even, there'll always be an open door to somebody, or I would allow myself to empathize with somebody so strongly, but that it was disruptive to my own life and my well-being and my peace.
Right. Like, cause you got to process things.
Right. But one of the things I didn't understand was it went further than that. It went deeper than that. Like, and I think the sexual abuse had a lot to do with that. And I think maybe some of it is just who I am as a person. But I was unaware of how little energetic boundary I had between myself and other people. So that if somebody was around me who had strong emotion, I felt that emotion and thought it was mine. So if I was in a situation where all of a sudden it got supercharged, like even sexually charged or something, I would think, oh my gosh, what is that? Even though I could pull away from that situation and go, where did that come from? I don't even like that person.
Do we call this an empath? Like, do you consider yourself an empath?
I've had people say that, and to the point where they're like, it's like you're psychic or something. Like you can, because I've had moments. Like one time, I've had a number of moments. There have been I could write a whole book on that. But one that stands out the most to me is that I had a girlfriend growing up, and her dad was taking me home. One day he had to give me a ride home, and it was just me and him in the car. And all of a sudden he just turned to me and he was crying and he said, "Thank you." And I looked at him and I was like, and I looked down and I was holding his hand. I was holding this adult man's hand, as a teenager, but there was something. It's like my body knew. His mother had passed away. I had no idea. I had no idea about any of it, but he was grieving and he was trying to hold it together. And then it's like something in my body just went, and it wasn't anything sexual. It wasn't anything weird like that. And the moment was it was almost would feel like something came through me. And I even as a teenager, I was like, that wasn't me. That was something that came through me. So I would have moments like that with people. I'd have moments where my husband, like when we first started dating, he sat in the car and I said, "What happened?" Like I could tell what the thoughts were, some part of the emotion I would just know.
So I always bring a beverage. I haven't been able to really record with the food yet. We did a little one deal. But so I brought a bottle of Bonanza. It's the best $20 wine you can probably buy right now.
I've never had it, so
you're in for a little bit of a treat, darling.
There you go.
My family drinks it. And I don't know who turned, I want to say Eric and I turned them on to this.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think we might have. And or one of my brothers, but because they're in the wine business too. Or my brother's in the wine business, and then we got a bunch of lushes in the family, don't we? Everybody likes to enjoy some good wine, but this has been a good bottle. I think it's a cab. Yeah, it's a cab. Yeah. It's bold, like the big bold cabs. And but when we talk about the healing process, I don't think I've mentioned to you. So Erica passed, and I know you said you're a suicide survivor.
Attempt, yeah.
Or suicide attempt.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
Excuse me. And I've known of other people. I know I've been in some dark places in life, and where I'm like, man, basically like, fuck this shit. Like, it's not that it's so dark that I just want to go. It's like, man, the frustration of life, of continuing to battle and going through all these experiences is just like, man, what is this for?
Right.
And so when I went through life, looking for love and going through relationships and learning, and then to finally be gifted it, and for 3.5 years,
right,
and then just to be kind of yanked away, it was like, man, what is this all about?
Right.
This is now I'm in a crisis of faith. Now I don't even know what the fuck I believe in, and I don't know who I am. I don't know what my purpose is. And I think if anything, it was more of the truth that I was seeking to create what was going to happen next. And unbeknownst to me, there's now a grieving process I've never had to go through. I had someone die 20 some years ago, but grieving was more like, okay, I'm good. Or whatever. And now I'm like, all right, now there's stages of grieving, and it gets messy too, because you want to go, I'm like, I'm a warrior. I'm going to move in this direction. Yeah. And then the cycles of the behavior and the emotions go like, oh, we're going to bang you down over here. And then at the same time, hey man, you're going to need to take on a healing process at the same time. What the fuck? So it really had to try and find some meaning to why this happened. Like, because it was very unexpected and tragic. It wasn't like she was diagnosed with cancer and she had 6 months to live. You know what I mean? It was just very sudden. She got ill, and it was a very strange thing. Why she was a month away from her 31st birthday, why she would have to pass like this with no pain or no real suffering. And for her mom, her dad, our families, and myself, it just was it was unbelievable. But in that moment of despair, of not wanting to live, it's like, man, I gotta find some help, man. And of course everyone's like, man, go get therapy. I'm like, man, I went to a therapist once in my life, and that ain't doing shit for me. I always feel advanced or educated enough to take it on myself. Well, you can't do that. Sure as hell I can.
Warrior.
And and I feel that I did that in the long run, but it was the use of psychedelics. It was mushrooms.
Did you know?
Psilocybin.
I'm looking at that. Really? Yeah, my therapist and I have been talking about it. Yeah, she's
oh man,
gotten certified in that.
Maybe that's half the reason we're meeting.
Yeah.
I feel this responsibility has come upon me to speak more on it and to find the legal avenues to, I don't know if exploit it is the right word, because there's a naturalist side to it. And, but it is ultimately the tool that saved me. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that it's a miracle. Right. It's more that it showed me the divine connection to a spiritual world, or that, there's a God, or there's a creator, or whatever it is you want to believe in. But for me, there's a connectedness for sure. Yes. Yeah. The connectedness, the unity. Yeah. And now you don't feel alone, or at least you're aware, even in your solitude and in that process of healing. Now you have something at least to acknowledge or believe in. Okay. I do like that. It's a little sweet, like just a tad sweet. Yes, it is. That's nice. Got drinkability. Yeah. Yeah, for $20, you find it at HEB or anywhere else. Advertising. Bonanza. Yeah, I mean, always sharing good stuff. We've had expensive tequilas already and a few other things, but no, not even the expensive ones. I mean, I might be able to, but because it seems like they don't carry as much a hangover, or they're aged and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, the energy thing is real. I think it was also like all of a sudden I'm getting crystals and things. Oh wow. And wearing amethyst necklaces, and I'm like, and I go to bed a couple nights, like, what the fuck am I doing? These fucking rocks. Yeah. And I'm just like, man, until finally I gave in. It's like, man, these things are being placed in my possession. And I started meditating, started microdosing more than macrodosing. Okay. The macro doses were needed. When you talk about it, you said it's like peeling back layers. Yeah, layers. Yeah. And that was on the first day, that's what David told me. He's like, man, James, I promise you over time, things will get better. Meaning like in these experiences. And I was like, man. And that first day, it was like the first day going back to the gym after taking off for 10 years. like this hurts.
This hurts. Yeah.
And ever since then, even those macro doses, those big doses, they are intense.
Yeah.
And it opens up things to where you're almost like an antenna. And it's kind of like the universe is talking to you.
Oh, I know what that sense of being an antenna is. Yeah, for sure.
Especially you telling me you're feeling energies and touching people. And even since then, I guess I never really recognized not saying my own power, but my own ability.
Right.
Whether it be in communication, like this is great communication. And I'm glad it's documented because you can always look back on it.
Yeah.
Because most times in conversation, we're going to forget.
Yeah.
You wrote that book.
Yeah.
It's set in history.
Yeah.
It's set in stone.
I know.
Your
and there's
kids,
stuff
grandkids,
in it too.
you know what I'm
there's
saying?
Some stuff in it. Yeah.
Like I think it feels great to share. And I know I'm supposed to be writing, and I started writing more last year, and things came out of me. I was like, wow, like this is something maybe I need to put time and effort into. Yeah. But then it's like, you got to pay bills and do things. So the artistic sense, we know.
It's a hard balance. I've been very fortunate that I am afforded the opportunity to write, like I don't, Pete earns a good living and we don't worry for a roof over our heads. So
you feel free in your creative process.
Yeah, but let me tell you, that was a very big battle for me because that feeling of freedom did not feel free. And I was not raised in a way where I would be okay with that idea that I was. So I had this issue with dependency in that I did not want to be dependent on somebody, but on the other hand, I was in ways learned helplessness. So I had this constant battle of, I need this to function, but now I'm mad that I need this to function. You know what I mean? So there's like, Pete would always be just like, do what you're called to do. And I'd be like, great. And then I'm like, I fucking hate myself because I'm not doing more. Like I'm not contributing in a way that makes sense in the world as it is today.
I think you're on your way.
Yeah. You think so?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. So I've known you for 20 something years, right? And we've not been close friends. Like, right. I mean,
we've known of each other. We've
acquaintances, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We wish well upon each other, see each other online or on Facebook, whatever it may be.
At Bohannon's one time.
Yeah. And at Bohannon's one time with your husband.
Yeah.
And, so I can say back then, so even for myself, working in the music business or in the studio, I learned a lot. So I went into music because I couldn't be an athlete anymore. And it was too much of a business. I had a bad back. I really wanted to be in athletics and playing basketball. Mm-hmm. And I played overseas for a short stint. And I was like, if I can't make money doing this, I'm going to do something else. And what was I passionate about? Passionate about music, even though I never played an instrument a day in my life. It's kind of like a Rick Rubin deal.
Yeah.
And that comes full circle because it's part of this conversation because I wanted to make beats. That was what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I went to the studio, or I went to a class with Marius Perron. He's grown his institute, engineering institute, or whatever it's called, here in town. And then I got an internship at the studio, mm-hmm. and then the internship turned into, yeah, man, come work. But I took on that, like, I want to learn. I'm a sponge, and I want to learn about music and the technical side. So producing and engineering was big, and then it got me into DJing and learning how to use microphones. And so I thought, man, I can kind of sing a little bit. I want to be an artist.
Yeah.
Fuck, that was a wrong decision, mate. And you know why it was the wrong decision?
I know why it was the wrong decision for me.
Because I wanted the reward, and I didn't understand the process, and I was having a hard time identifying myself. Mm-hmm. So I was doing what felt natural, or what we're supposed to do.
Right.
Like you saying, like being a female artist, oh, well, you need to look sexy, or you need to wear this, and you need to write songs like this. But the reality is you need to go within and release what's in, regardless of what it is. And because it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah. there's so much I've learned. I feel more myself today as a musician and as an artist.
I see it.
Than I have ever felt in my life.
And that's my observation.
That's
why I said for you're on your way, because I saw you back then.
Yeah.
And
lost.
I wouldn't say lost.
I feel like,
but I get it. Because I guess I was in the same boat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think like I came to this, it's the same thing as being in relationships for me. The same problem. I was looking for an answer and thought that was it. And also thought that it could give me something it couldn't give me. So I think a lot of people go into the music industry who are broken people who need to express. And there's somewhere in the back of the head that they think they're going to get validation. The music industry does not give you validation.
No, not at all.
It does not. There's so much rejection. And there's so many blind people leading blind people in the music industry. Mm-hmm. And I was faced with a lot of poor behavior in male dominated perspectives that were not healthy for me. And it's not, I can't blame.
No, you needed that.
Right.
It's part of your process, part of your growth.
And I can't blame somebody else for just being who they are in that situation, because that's the way the situation was made. Like that was created that way. And it was a very male centered, arena. And I was used to being in male spaces because I grew up kind of like always being interested in things that were just like a little like not so feminine, right? So, but at the same time, because of the abuse and because of other factors, I would miss danger signals that something's not right here, or I'm slowly being worn down and I'm slowly losing myself and my perspective. So music for me was what saved me in college, because I had overdosed and I was lost after losing a relationship that I thought was the end all be all of my entire existence at.
Do you call that a second chance on life?
What do you mean? What?
Overcoming an overdose. Do you call that a second chance on life?
Yeah. I mean, it was a part of the process. It was a thing that it showed me just how lost I was, like, because I had hidden so much from myself. And then at that moment when I overdosed and I was like, oh, this is really bad. I'm in a bad place and I don't realize how messed up my head is. And something needs to be done. So that started my process, my learning of like actually going into therapy and doing, doing some of the work, right? But it took me decades to really, get through the work, and a string of different therapists, because, it's hard to find the right one, right? But, in the music industry, I think, so I started out there at college writing songs. It's the way I survived. It's the way I got past what had happened. So I went from overdosing, which I don't recall overdosing. I remember looking at the bottle and then seeing an empty bottle. And then... Is
it possible that there was outside forces involved? Were you intoxicated or anything?
No,
or?
I think I think there's, especially with the medical community doesn't know exactly how it's going to affect everybody's brain when you put them on SSRIs or, so I think there was an element of that. Like
absolutely.
So I, after that happened though, in order to function afterwards and to realize my life had become a nightmare, I started writing. So I started writing songs. And that was my therapy, because there were things I couldn't say out loud still. I still couldn't admit to people what had happened to me, or I could only give them little pieces of the story and not the whole thing. And so music was the way I could sort of process emotion. Then I get into the music industry and it becomes less and less about processing that emotion and more about like a means to an end. Like, oh, you got to be, you're going to be famous, or you're going to be, have to have all these followers, or, it became this whole thing like this. That's where I'm going to get my validation.
Yes.
It became about validation. And so I was either feeling the pressure of having to please an audience, or feeling the pressure of having to please the people I was working with. And that was a danger zone for me, because it became this whole thing about dependency on where else am I going to get my validation?
It takes
has
away,
to come through
it
this.
takes away from the true creative process.
Yeah.
So after listening to Rick Rubin's new book, did you listen to it?
I'm about halfway through it.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dude, so cool, man, because it's
a lot of good things in there.
It talks about one part, or I can't remember, but basically about how you can't set a time to sit down and be creative.
Mm-hmm.
It comes in waves, and when it comes, sit the fuck down and ride it until it stops, so you can at least get your stuff out. But when you sit down and force something, it's not the same.
Oh no,
that's why certain artists, right? In development, they sound good, but that heart, that soul doesn't come through, even though they are soulful people. I think I had a hard time with that, is because the brain works in two ways. Either you're mechanical like this and turning knobs and doing the programming and things, right?
Lobe, yeah.
And then the other one, playing instruments, is different. The other one, singing, is different. And if you're in your head while you're singing about what you're singing, you're not saying what's in.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the development of that, and I had a hard time trying to communicate certain things with being an amateur musician. I mean, I could only play by ear. The great thing is I had a good mentor who showed me what good musicianship was. So I was able to recognize good musicians, and now I can communicate with good musicians, and we can do this together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that was a good avenue for me. Let's say you weren't married and in a situation where, because I heard you talk about your friends going to do shows, or being forced to go do shows or something, and you're like, because they need to make the money.
Right.
Doesn't that changes, right? Like
that? Yeah. I mean, if.
Would you? I guess I can't say what would you have done, because we don't know. We're not back then. But it's a tough one, because when you're having to perform music just to make money,
to survive, it's a different.
And that was
thing.
kind of it for me. Is I was like, how am I gonna make a living? I'm making a little money at the studio, but then I was DJing, so I was majority. And I think that's a huge thing for artists to overcome, getting over that block.
Yeah.
Getting over that block.
That block, I mean, that complicates it for sure. And I think it was just a hard thing, because I hated performing.
Yes, yeah. You know what? I get it. I get it.
And it wasn't.
I get it.
But the thing is, sometimes I really do enjoy it.
Right.
But I was so wrapped up in my head about this idea of this expectation that I had to be performative about my sexuality, about my womanhood,
how about now?
Everything. Now it's just like, I'll do what
This me.
This is what I want to do, even if it's not to other people's expectations. Some people are like, well, don't you want to be this big thing? I'm like, no, I don't. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure even what it's going to look like, but I know that what I'm doing now, I'm happier.
Is it fair to say life is precious?
Of course it's fair. I think so.
I think that initial day with the psilocybin, that was probably one of the most important things I failed to communicate, is that life is so precious.
Yeah.
So when we can take moments to reflect or look back on that and say, man, it's so precious, we should really value the time. Obviously, we can't do that when we're living life, and you need time and separation in order to look back on something to reflect.
Yeah. I mean, I got into
but knowing that, right, it should be at somewhere in our core of in a sense of performance, because it works the same with writing and in that natural sense. And I guess retrospect to where this conversation kind of started a little bit with this in the studio is I truly can see your growth, or the awareness of that, and you overcoming that just by listening to your last songs.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And the one stuck out to me more, and I guess you had worked with the producer for that last one. It has a radio edit because it has one cuss word in it.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah,
I was like, oh, isn't this cute? All right, darling. But I like that. But it was the first one. It's I got you.
I told you so.
I told you so.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
I really like that.
It sneaks up on you. I think a friend of mine said that too. She goes, I
I thought it was the best one out of the crew.
Well, yeah, and that's what she said too. She goes, I didn't think it first, and then I heard it, and she's like, that's
like,
yeah,
I want to hear that again.
Yeah, it hits you. It hits you. Yeah.
What are some of the, can you quote a couple of lyrics?
I told you so.
Let me find out. I told you so.
I told you
no,
so.
but all right, where did it come from?
Okay.
Because I forget
because I talk about it in the book.
Do you ever write songs and then look back a year or two later? Fuck, I don't even remember writing that.
No, that was the weirdest song of the bunch, because what had happened in what inspired that was, so I talk about it in the book. This idea of dependency often led me into having very unhealthy attachments to other people outside of my marriage that was not healthy, right? Friendships that maybe sometimes, crossed a line that was not appropriate, I mean, and I'm not saying I didn't sleep around with people, but it was like bad enough to where I would get very confused.
Were you I don't want to say giving into that. Like, what was your responsibility in that? Were you partaking in were you allowing some of that, or are you just like deflecting a little bit, or
I don't think
were you playing along a little bit?
I felt compelled. I will say that I felt compelled. Like, my first album was called Drawn. I felt drawn, and I did not understand why. And I thought it was some bizarre thing. I thought it meant that maybe, like, I love my husband. Like, I love him deeply. And I didn't understand, what does that mean then? How do I keep getting drawn to these people, and I get so wrapped up in my head, like I need them or I can't let go of them. And I'm not saying it didn't always cross a line of
sexuality,
being or any kind of attraction, but sometimes it did, and that would get very confusing. I'm like, how do I extract? Because once I would extract myself, I'd be like, what the fuck was that? Like, I'm not even remotely attracted to this person, and somehow I got super hyper involved, thinking that I could not live without them in my life, that they had to be present all the time. And I started to understand that I had this, like, I didn't have good boundaries. Like, I was kind of taking on this expectation that they had of me, of maybe like, hey, and I was like, oh,
maybe there's a chance.
I was on automatic, because I feel like I was conditioned to immediately go into this, okay, this is my purpose and I serve it. Because I think for most of my life, I felt as if, so it wasn't just that I was molested. I was also, like, I had a teacher that laid sexual advances on me. I had people that I work with. It seemed to be like this repeat thing that kept happening, because there are women that they don't ever experience that ever in their lives. But yet I was a magnet for men who would take liberties.
Is it possible you weren't aware that happens to many
it does,
more women?
It really does.
Because it's fair to say that now, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it's totally fair to say that, because it happens to a lot of women. But I know of women who will say, well, yeah, that never happened to me. But I would like have this blind spot where I would not see it coming. And then when it came, I would be like, all of a sudden, I'm just supposed to fall into that role. I'm supposed to fill their expectation.
Let me ask you this then. Is it fair to say, I say people come into our lives for 4 reasons. A reason, a season, a lesson, or a blessing. And then not everyone's supposed to be there.
Right. Maybe.
All the time. Maybe certain people came into your life for a reason, because of this energy.
Right. I really feel, and I'm not, and I say this, and I'm trying to be very careful when I say this, because I don't think anybody, I think it's not fair to say, oh, you attracted any kind of abuse, or to say to somebody who suffered abuse that they attracted it. But I think sometimes when we have been abused, especially at a young age, we're conditioned in a way where our bodies react to something that is almost feels like it's beyond our control. It's like an automatic, it's like a pathway that was worn, and then all of a sudden it's like, I will say that there were many times that I felt strangely attracted to a dangerous thing and then completely repelled by a healthy thing. And that's what happens with abuse. And so
I've seen that. I've witnessed that.
Right?
I've experienced that.
Right. So I think that there was a lot of that mixed in, because I was very confused by my own behavior, and it gave me a lot of shame, because I did not understand what was happening, and why I felt so compelled or so drawn to certain people in a way that I knew wasn't healthy. And I knew it wasn't healthy because I would feel like these repeat feelings of the first time basically what happened before the suicide attempt, because it was like when my boyfriend broke up with me, I thought my life was over. And so it kept feeling like the separation anxiety that would happen. If somebody would come into my life, I would like all of a sudden feel so attached to them for like just intensely. And then the split from that, once was realized it was unhealthy, felt like I was gonna die. I felt like sick to my stomach, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It was a lot of enmeshment that was not healthy. But I will say that I had mentors in the music industry that wasn't a line that was crossed at all. But that a different kind of enmeshment would happen where I would feel so dependent on them for every decision. And I think in some cases it was like, it made me more and more, it fed my insecurities more than it did to help me grow as an artist. It convinced me more and more that I didn't have the capability, that somebody else had to do things, that their word was right, their perspective was righter than mine, their opinion was better than mine. They had facts and I was just lost. So I eventually came to a point where I was like, I can't even make a fucking decision on my own. I need to be able to do that. And that was not met well. So I had to split from that energy. I tried to, like, when I did the project and I did the book along with it.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I really tried to.
You try to put them together, right? Like the songs match the book.
Yeah, the songs, each chapter is tells about some of the inspiration behind the song and the situation that inspired the song.
Which came first?
I will say the songs came first. The songs absolutely came first because that's how my brain works. It comes out in song and then I analyze and then I figure out.
When did you pick up? How old were you when you picked up a guitar?
I was probably 19, 20, something like that. I didn't pick up a guitar.
Wow.
I'm not. That wasn't my first. I mean, I sang in choir.
Have you become a better guitar player?
I feel like I've become a little bit better, but I don't consider myself a guitarist. Like, I don't tell people I'm a guitarist. I'm like, I accompany myself.
Because you mainly play rhythm.
Well, yeah.
To sing.
So to me, it's not like, I don't call myself a guitarist, but I play a little guitar. As my ex-boyfriend used to say that, I play a little guitar. It's this big.
But definitely a vocalist.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's come a long way too. I went to school. I have my degree in music education. Voice was my principal instrument.
Do you get theory very well?
I did when I was in school, and then it just went right out. It's not something that I don't think in terms of theory. I've always thought in terms of emotion. That's it. Emotion.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so when you wrote these songs, define that process a little bit, because you're working with a new producer or a friend?
Different producers, but the person who my friend Jake is. Well, I'm working with other producers now, but I also have my friend Jake Owen, who he produced one of my other albums previously, and then he produced this. Oh, okay. This album, and he's
obviously
he's
you find, and I think it's cool. I do like when I see artists that are able to communicate and do things with multiple producers, because everyone brings their own.
Right. Yeah.
Their own plethora of artillery of things to the table of how that process works.
Yeah.
And it brings out different dynamics within us.
Yeah. My favorite thing about working with Jake is that he's a person who, I think one of the first experience I had of working with a male musician, and that just saw me as another musician and not as a female musician. Just like, oh, what do you want to do? You want to do that? Okay. Oh, I have to fix it for you because you don't know what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, because I've had a lot of that. But I mean, and that's not fair. Like, I'm not going to say that they assume that I don't know what I'm doing. It's more like, let me fix.
Yeah, let me tweak this. Let me do this.
I want it to look more like what I want it to look like for you, rather than he was just like, what do you want it to look like? And then he's like,
so what did you bring to him?
I brought to him the songs. The songs as they are, basically. I mean, he's an amazing arranger. Like, he arranges really well, and he's a great guitarist and instrumentalist, and he's So like what you hear with all the synth and the stuff like that, that's him and his partner Andy. I love the way their mind works with arrangement. I've always loved what they do, and what Jake does in particular, because he was a sideman for me for a while too, and I just love his style. And so I basically just brought the songs with my chords and just made them little acoustic demos, and he's just like, okay, and he would just go, okay, I have some ideas, throw it out there, tell me if you like it. If you don't like it, that's fine, I'll start over if you don't like it. And so we kind of just did that process. And then he would send me something and I would be like, holy shit, that sounds awesome, I love it.
So how do you grow from this? What's next?
Oh, okay. So
So you overcame a big barrier, you did these things. Like, how would one challenge themselves to advance, whether it be in songwriting or in vocal presentation? How would you grow next?
Well, I will say that I'm kind of like on a journey that's not dissimilar to yours about following the kind of like where I'm pulled. And one of the things because I almost completely, before this was out, I thought this would be my last album. Like I wasn't going to do anything.
I could see that. I mean, I could see what that feeling would be like.
I'm like, I'm done. I can't, this is the music industry is so toxic for me as I was going through this latest healing. Because my body broke down. So the pandemic happened. We were starting that project. 2 years in, I started just wanting to do a couple songs with him, and I said, I want to do this whole project. I got this idea, and then I did. And then when we were supposed to release it, my body completely just broke down, and they thought I had Lyme. I was on several courses of antibiotics. I was paranoid all the time. My doctor thought I had a psychotic break. I begged my husband to institutionalize me at one point, because I was like, I didn't feel safe. It was like all the trauma.
Releasing.
I mean, I lost so much weight because I couldn't eat. I couldn't swallow. There was just a ton of stuff happening.
How long was this?
This was in 2020. What's it? This is the 2023. This is
2022. How long was that process?
And it was about a 5 or 6 month illness that I was, dealing with. And then I got in this very strict program. And it was sort of like I think what happened was that I had there was all the stress. It was trauma coming to the surface. It was my hormones shifting. So, you reach a certain age, your hormones start shifting. It was a perfect storm.
You don't look your age.
Well, I'm just saying, it was a perfect storm.
Do you want to take a small break?
Okay.
Maybe have one last bit.
Sure.
All right.
This is very tasty.
I love it. This is the best $20 bottle just to have in the house.